Hi, everybody. Welcome back to CanHammer, your source for 40K from the Great White North. And today we're starting a new series called On The Vox. Came up with that like just now. And this is basically a series that I'm doing interviewing people for the podcast and for the channel. And so that's going to start today with our inaugural episode. And I've got on interview today all the way across the pond, Mr. Lawrence Baker from Tabletop Tactics fame. Say hi to everyone, Lawrence.
Hello, how are you?
Great. Thanks for joining us. What time is it there?
It is 10 o'clock in the morning. So.
All right. Yeah. So it's 5 o'clock here, which is actually my actual wake-up time and hobby time. So not too much of an inconvenience for me. And so thanks very much for joining us on our first kind of episode. We've had the podcast running for almost 6 or 7 years, and we have guests on, but we don't do kind of interviews for people who can't necessarily come as a guest. So it's great to talk to you.
Yeah, and I'm really thankful to be on board.
Yeah, it's really cool. So, and the modern technology wonders allow us to actually talk like we're sitting next to each other, which is amazing.
I know, this is crazy.
So why don't you just tell everybody kind of who you are and what Tabletop Tactics is?
Sure thing. So I'm Lawrence Baker. I run Tabletop Tactics. I started the channel, which is a YouTube channel, started it about 2 years ago, and as a battle report channel mainly, and did some painting tutorials and other hobby-related stuff. And over time, these past 2 years, it's been crazy. I've been going to lots of tournaments, been to the LVO twice now, meeting lots of people in the community, and it's been an amazing ride. So that's essentially what I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I discovered your channel must have been pretty soon after it started, because that's when I started getting interested in re-entering the game, and
Sure.
It has just exploded. It's crazy.
No, I mean, it is. I mean, I don't. I suppose if I give you a bit more detail, like when I started the channel, I always hoped that, I'd find an audience and people would be interested in it. But I had no idea what it would become. It's sort of, because I'm an actor by trade. So when I started the channel, I wanted to do something creative, and then it just yeah. I mean, I'm very lucky. It's just exploded, and the community seemed to like it, so it's cool.
Yeah, so you actually have two channels. One is an on-demand, and one is a kind of free view. How many subscribers do you have in the free view now?
So I think we're on 27,000 now.
Wow,
yeah,
that's crazy. We last time I checked this morning, we're at 2,300, I think.
Hey, that's cool, dude. I mean, I remember when I got like my first 100 subscribers, I was like, oh my goodness, there's 100 people that want to watch this. Yeah.
Well, I got to say that probably watching your battle reports got me into the game again, for one, like to actually want to play, and then
Awesome.
definitely made me want to get involved in content production.
Awesome.
And I was thinking, if somebody can do it, then we can do it.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And then on the on-demand is so where people kind of subscribe for content, right?
Exactly right. So I mean, on demand, if in an ideal world, I would just put out everything for free. Like honestly, I would. But sadly, it's just not realistic, because it takes, Darren, as you probably know, it actually takes 6 hours to film a battle report, and then in order to edit it, it takes me up to 4 hours, especially if I start doing some effects, which Tabletop Tactics has become a bit famous for, doing lots of different effects, especially in the narrative campaigns, and that's more than a day's work. So when you end up doing three videos a week, you end up working 40 hours a week minimum. So yeah, on demand is there to support the channel, really, for it to exist.
Yeah, and you just kind of learn how to do all that stuff from scratch.
Well, this is the weird thing. So no, I didn't. I was quite fortunate. So a lot of people ask me this, so this would probably be a good opportunity to. So I know a lot of people are curious about how how you get into YouTubing, if you like, or how do you set up a battle report channel. I trained as an actor. And I was working as an actor for a while in Australia. But before I did that, I worked in post-production, and that's where I picked up all of my editing and effects skills.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of began a career behind the camera. Then I went in front of the camera. And on top of that, I worked IT part-time as well. And that's where I learned web development and all of this sort of jazz. So I ended up having this amalgamation of skills that just all came together so I could create this channel. The thing I did have to learn was things like sound, audio, such an important thing. I was already aware of cameras and lighting, but yeah, like first, if you go way back to the beginning, like the first 6 months of videos, the audio is like not that good. It's okay, but it's like quite tinny and grainy and stuff. So I had to learn all of that. But luckily, everything else I had on board.
Yeah, like your battle reports seem to improve all the time. And now most recently, I guess you added like the background, which adds to the sort of environment of the game, and certainly it gets steadier as you go. You're able to hold more dice in one hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I think I'm up to about 12.
Thing, like holding dice in one hand, because the games, like Sigmar or 40k, that you've got a fistful of dice and you're trying to hold this camera at the same time. It's quite difficult, but
yeah, I'm still training. I'm up to maybe about 10 or 12 dice in one hand.
Yeah.
Cool. And and then you've got your sort of group of guys with you. So you've got like the Colonel, the Beard, the Chef. I think I had some responsibility in producing that name. And then you've got the Bone now as well, and then the occasional other people. So are those your friends, or those people you just end up playing in 40K? How did you go around with those?
So yeah, it's a funny one. Like I met them all quite differently, really. So the Chef, he was actually a staff member at my local games workshop.
Okay.
And I just popped in, and this was before I started the channel, right? I was popping in over time, and I'd had the idea for a channel for years, really, but I'd never really acted on it. And then one day, I won't bore you with that story now, but it came to a point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to just do this. And I set it all up within 2 weeks. But I spoke to the chef, pastry chef, and I was like, dude, do you have any armies painted? He's like, no.
You were in the store.
Like, well, yeah, I was like, so you're a staff member without a painted army? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, if you paint an army, I'd love to have you on the channel. And he was like, all right. And so in 2 weeks, he painted his Necron army.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like literally in 2 weeks. He just got it painted. And then he got on board. So I met him as a staff member. The Colonel was actually a regular at that same shop who contacted me because we'd met a few times and said, I'm on board. And I was like, yeah. Beard, I used to work with in IT. So he's a friend. And Bone, I actually went to drama school with him. So like he's an actor as well. So we've sort of known each other for years. Yeah, Bone is very very loud and flamboyant. So yeah.
Well, I think what makes a big special part of your channel is the camaraderie between you guys. The banter at the beginning and throughout the game, it kind of makes it entertaining to watch in and of itself, not just like for the 40K. So that's definitely a big part of it. So what do you think is the ethos behind your channel? Like, what are you trying for it to achieve, or how are you trying to portray 40K, that sort of thing?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, I want the channel to be, the channel has sort of, it's known in a way for some more competitive battle reports. And I think that happened because at the time, maybe not so much now, but at the time of Tabletop Tactics being released, a lot of the other battle report channels weren't doing really hardcore tournament reports, other than Frontline Gaming, right? And then it was also SG Tactics as well. They were doing them, but it was all in a very much like an esports e-cast sort of thing, rather than a cinematic style, if you like. Yep. But the weird thing is that we do some strong battle reports. We have competitive lists, but then we also do the narrative campaigns as well. And ironically, despite doing the really competitive lists, we never really take it to the full level. Very rarely, like we're not doing super friends lists and that sort of jazz. But I think what I would like to answer your question is, over time, I just want the channel to be an all-round hobby channel. Like I love the painting side of it. I love the narrative side of it. I love the competitive side of it. I'm a tournament player as well. I just want it to be a go-to spot, for the hobby. And so that's why I actually created a forum on my website now as well, so that again, it's another way for the community to interact, and you can sign up to that for free. So if it can just be like a hobby destination, that would be awesome.
That's cool. So what do you think specifically about it makes it so popular? Is it just content, or? Well,
so that's, that's probably the question I'm asked the most. That, and how to become a battle report producer. I think, you can never be certain why something's popular. You know, like I think there's a bit of luck involved as well. Like I started the channel at a time where there wasn't really any other battle report channel doing things in the style that I ended up doing it. So, you know, in a way that I'd sort of captured that specific audience there, and I've done it a bit differently to say Mini Wargaming, you know, who are obviously huge as well. So there's that element, a bit of luck, but I think the main thing, the main key ingredient is, yes, you can have good quality videos. Yes, you can, you know, have very pretty models and everything's painted really, you know, beautifully and so forth. But I think the audience need to engage with the crew, you know, and as you said, there's a variety of people on the channel, and we're great mates. You know, we have a good laugh when we play, and I think that really comes across on screen. And I think that's the difference. Tabletop Tactics has a lot of genuine banter, whereas if you just film the models or just film the game, you know, from a very sort of sterile tournament play perspective, then perhaps you're not going to capture as many people's interest because they haven't got that personal connection, you know?
Yeah. Like I feel like when I watch your channel, like I want to go there and play. You know,
yeah.
Like, often you just watch a bat rep. It's like, okay, whatever. Maybe you don't even watch the whole thing, right? But we're like, you know, it's an hour and a bit, and if you watch the whole thing, it's because like you want to be there and watching, or you want to be there and play. That's the feeling I get when I watch.
Well, the idea is, I mean, so talking about where I want to get the channel as well, like this year even, we are in the new year. I'm probably going to upgrade the space. And as and when I do so, I'll sort of open up to challenge matches and that sort of jazz. So it'd be really, really cool to meet people from the community and have them come in and meet the others and have some games.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's talk 40K now. What's your personal preference playing 40K? Competitively, not so competitively, you know?
Yeah, no, good question. So here's the funny thing. I'm not actually a huge fan of super competitive tournaments. This is the weird irony, despite me going to them often. I love the atmosphere. You know, don't get me wrong. Like the LVO is, I don't know if have you been to the LVO, Darren?
Not yet, nope.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like having that many hobbyists in one space is awesome. However, the downside to it is if you're playing in the competitive events, you're going to come up against lists that aren't particularly cinematic, that obviously break the narrative or fluff of the game, and are designed to curb stomp people, right? You know, now, and that's fine. You know, I don't mind playing those games at all. You know, hence why I go to these events. But at the same time, in an ideal world, I would prefer the hardcore competitive events to have far stricter list building restrictions, really, because ultimately playing those lists again and again and again, it's not that fun. My favorite type of game is to play strong games. I like, because it's a game. You know, you should try and build something which does well. You know, you don't want to go into the game aiming to lose, right? But at the same time, I'd like the list to be a bit more balanced and look good on the table, as opposed to here's an Ultramarine army, except they're actually White Scars, but they've also got a Riptide wing of 5 Riptides in there as well. Yeah. You know, and you can do that, and I don't mind playing it. But if it ends up happening again and again and again, tournaments, hardcore tournaments, you tend to see the same sorts of lists, and it repeats, which is a bit boring, right?
Yeah, I guess that's just where kind of 40K has ended up.
Yeah, that's right.
The game has been designed in the last couple of years. So.
No, I couldn't put it better myself. It's absolutely a symptom of the rules and of 7th edition. So, you know, hopefully this new edition will level it a little bit, and we'll see what happens.
Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's inevitable, given that we're still within a couple of months of the event, that possibly one of the talking points of LVO was that who's this Lawrence Baker guy coming in? What it was, it 8th or 9th with?
Well, I was
Dark
I was 9th place.
That's something that before that nobody ever thought was possible. No, I mean, true. I think people know that, like people like you and Scary, who play a lot of Dark Eldar online, and you've won a lot of tournaments at No Retreat and things like that. So, but different kind of formats. So to show up at LVO and do that well, granted you had some Eldar in there, but everybody's got some Eldar in their army.
I know that's the format, right? It supports that exactly.
Yeah, so that was big news, and I don't want you to necessarily go through all your individual games because that kind of thing is kind of boring.
Sure.
What do you think are some highlights from LVO in terms of the playing, and what do you think you can learn from LVO in terms of the playing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a great question. I can summarize this pretty quickly for you, actually. So the LVO, what I just spoke about is a really good example. You're going to get a lot of the same sorts of lists, right? So a lot of people would short code that as net lists, right? So there's lots of net lists there. And as a result, I think that the good tournament player doesn't take a net list. This is just my opinion, right? But I think the good tournament player, or really the great tournament player, doesn't take a net list. He innovates, or he takes something which he knows will be good against the net list, a meta breaking list, right? And what the Dark Elder provided, specifically with the Reaver spam that I took, was a meta breaking list. It was very, very effective because, your Warp Spider spam lists, which became very, very popular after Alex Harrison won it in 2016. Warp Spiders don't like Reavers. They're really rubbish against Reaver jet bikes. They don't have ignore cover inherently. They wound against the initiative value, which a lot of people forget, and Reavers are initiative 6, so they're only wounding Reavers on 4s. And the only way you kill Warp Spiders is by charging them, really, because you shoot them, they flicker jump. There's always 2 line-of-sight blocking bits of terrain in the middle of the board, so the Warp Spiders would just always hide behind it if you tried to shoot them. So I needed a really fast assault element to also be able to deal with people camping, like Tau, etc. And it worked incredibly well, dude. It really did, because even against scat packs, that your sort of C-spam scat packs or Riptide Wings with their burst cannons, all I needed was Night Fight, and I've got a 2-up Jinx save at that point. You can deploy out of range of things like Marker Lights or SMS to ensure that they don't get their ignore cover off, and then just shoot them down a bit with your Skatach Wraith Knight within. That was the other thing I took, which is a bit different. So everyone says, why are you not taking the Death Shroud? Well, my list doesn't need that. I've got ignore cover in the assault element because I took 6 units of 6 Reavers. I needed the anti-tank range support, so I took the 2 Inferno Lances, and let me tell you, that Wraith Knight is incredible. It did serious work, the entire tournament. But yeah, it went really well. So that's my sort of commentary on the LVO.
Cool. So jumping ahead a little bit, what do you think about the Ynari then? Because to me, it seems like, maybe GW doesn't think we need to fix the Dark Eldar, but why don't we just have them lump in with Eldar anyway?
Yeah.
And then let them do everything twice. What do you think of the Ynari stuff?
Well, Darren, let me tell you, it was quite funny. At first, when the Ynari first came out, I got a lot of messages around it. And a lot of that from a lot of Elder players, of course. And they were like, the Ynari look pretty cool, but it's a shame because they can't take Warp Hunters, they can't take Hornets, so they're just not as good as a normal Elder CAD. And I personally disagreed with that statement, like out of hand. The Ynari are so incredibly powerful when abused that normal Elder just don't compare. This is, again, my opinion. Darren, I'm pretty sure you've watched the battle report where I used the Ynari against
yeah. It was a little bit painful.
Yeah. The problem is the Soul Burst rule, allowing you, it's got no downside, allowing you to act in your opponent's turn and your own turn, additionally for free. That rule, when abused, is incredibly powerful. Now, if Games Workshop had released that book 2 or 3 weeks before the LVO, my list would have been a Ynari list. And you can never guarantee that you're going to be in the top 8, but it added about 50% power to an already incredibly powerful list. Mm-hmm. It just would have been so ridiculous, to the point where it's not fun, actually, for your opponent. Soul Burst, Reavers and Soul Burst is like a marriage made in heaven. And I think that the Ynari, unfortunately, I hate to say it, I think I think Games Workshop, in terms of the rules writing, they've been doing so well recently. I've been really, really inspired by a lot of the stuff that they've been doing. But I think that was a bit of a ball drop, because they've made arguably the best faction in the game better.
Yeah. It's gotten some people pretty salty over that. Did Eldar really need that?
Yeah, I know, dude. So, I mean, look, here's the thing, though, guys. Like, will we see this book still being valid in 8th edition? Now, I don't know. But if they end up invalidating the entire book range and doing a Sigmar, then again, that problem may be solved. But if they don't do a Sigmar and all of the current books are valid, I don't know how they're going to get around Ynari being that amazing. You'll just go to a tournament and everyone will be using Ynari,
Yeah. We've got a big team tournament coming up in about a month, and there's 80 players, so 20 teams, and everybody's got Eldars now, Ynari. Because it's the same, right? Like, you just switch it from a cat to an Ynari. There's no extra restrictions, and boom, you can do everything twice.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's crazy. It's crazy good. But yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that. At the same time, if you don't abuse it, it's actually really cool. The avatar's awesome, and there's some really fluffy things that you can do in there. So it's just coming back round full circle to my tournament thing. That's the downside of the tournaments. It's natural to take the best thing at a tournament because you're there to compete, but at the same time, you're going to see the same thing again and again.
Yeah. So on that point, you go back to LVO again. Next year is probably going to be even bigger. Who knows what the game will be like next year, but you'll be going back, I presume.
That's the LVO, 100%. So unless some weird life thing comes up where I can't be in Vegas in February, assuming they do it in February again. But I don't, as you say, I don't know what I'll take. I get lots of Dark Elder support, so people say take the Dark Elder. The problem is now with the Ynari release, it's that I can't use the Dark Elder now. It's too powerful. But yeah, I will return. Don't know what I'll take yet, but hopefully, Darren, you'll be there too.
Yeah, we'll see. Hard to go to Vegas to play games.
Yeah.
And so what do you think of the ITC in general? Do you think that's a good format, or?
Yeah, look, I do like the missions. I really enjoy the missions. I love what the ITC has become. What Frontline Gaming did and creating the ITC in an era where Games Workshop weren't really involved with the community. The dark times, we shall call it, was amazing. And we now have an international ranking system. Effectively, we've got a player finder. This is an amazing thing for the hobby. So, do I like the ITC? Yeah, I love the ITC. I enjoy the mission format. I love what it's done for the community in the hobby. I just wish that their list building restrictions were stricter. That's what I would go single faction. Mm-hmm. Some would argue that's more boring, but actually I think it requires a little bit more skill to play, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, being in Europe, obviously, actually, I didn't mention it at the beginning, but Lawrence is in England. Other than the format of like tournaments and ITC and stuff, how do you think the meta or the game is different in Europe? Or is it? Because Americans assume it's very different.
Yeah, well, look, Americans are right to a point. Now, ITC is gathering momentum here. Obviously, ITC originating from the States, obviously is bigger there, right? Also, you guys, certainly per capita get a lot more tournaments. In England, funnily enough, there aren't not really that many tournaments, and there certainly aren't many big tournaments. There really aren't, But ITC is gathering momentum. But what we have here in Europe is something called the ETC, which is the European Team Championships, right? So there's actually a Team USA as well now, and that format is considerably different to the ITC. So what you end up getting with a European meta, if you like, is a lot more D, because D is full flavored in the ETC. So you'll get Wraith Knights with the D cannons. They almost play straight out of the rule book. So as a result, you're going to get some pretty crazy armies and some pretty crazy Forge World units as well. They have restricted some things, but yeah, the meta is slightly different. But Alex Harrison that won the LVO, like that warp spider spam, because in the ETC, for example, there was no restriction on the amount of jumps that warp spiders could make.
Yeah.
So he was taking a list which was obviously incredibly powerful in Europe. And he knew even just the one jump, it would still be incredibly powerful at the LVO. And then as a result, you saw he just went and took it with that list. He steamrolled. But yeah, the meta is different if people are playing ETC. But now it's starting to come together as the ITC expands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know certainly at this team tournament I talked about, we're playing ETC. It's kind of a training for Team Canada. But yeah, I've been reading the missions and it's like, well, it's like really different.
Are you Team Canada, Darren?
I'm not in Team Canada, no.
Okay, I was about to say.
No, but several of the people I game with regularly are Team Canada. Awesome. We're a big country, but not too many people play Warhammer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did notice there's not a huge number of events. So you got like the London GT, Northwest I think is pretty big. But Nottingham is the home of GW, so you would think England would be a hub for that sort of thing. But
yeah, I know. So there's a couple of reasons for that. It's not that we lack players, but honestly, it's because we just don't have the space. I think that's what it comes down to. Yeah, it's very, very expensive in the UK to hire, an events hall, and then to travel in the UK when people, pay for hotels and everything. It just is not. We're not as land rich as North America or places like Australia, which has also got a massive tournament scene. Because I lived in Australia for 6 years myself. So yeah, I think that's one of the reasons. Also, I think the other reason was that because Games Workshop didn't provide any community support for such a long time, and the Frontline Gaming were really innovative in creating a support structure. In the UK, we didn't have that, so it was really down to a tournament organizer to come up with all of his own rules and then advertise it all himself. There was no independent tournament circuit to advertise his event on. So as a result, the tournament scene was pretty stagnant in the UK. Changing rapidly now, though. Like even within the last couple of years, new tournaments are popping up and big ones too. And now you've got Warhammer Fest Grand Tournament as well, run by Games Workshop. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I lived in Nottingham actually for 6 years.
Oh, did you really?
Okay. In the late 90s, and I wasn't playing at that time, so I didn't go to GW a single time.
Yeah.
I used to pop into their local store occasionally just to look at old models, but so it'd be
funny.
Cool to go there now.
You're living in the hub. For years. Did you even go to Warhammer World or?
No, I don't think it existed back then. I don't know.
Oh, right.
Late 90s. I don't know, but
it's certainly. I mean, the HQ is there, but I think you're right. I don't think it was like an open venue. I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. I did my training there, so I was there for about 6 years.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Age of Sigmar. So that is something that I and many people feel the English and the Europeans are in advance of than the Americans. So, what do you think of Age of Sigmar? You obviously enjoy it. And do you see yourself competing in Age of Sigmar? Yeah.
So this ties into our previous topic. So the reason that Age of Sigmar is doing it seemingly so, doing quite well, is because what Games Workshop did after they released the General's Handbook, which was maybe 6 months after they initially released it, which the initial release was a massive shock, which is understandable. And, there was definitely a lot of frustration in the community. And I was getting lots of messages about it. And I wasn't even covering Warhammer Fantasy at the time, but I had the intention to do so. So I'm getting lots of messages about it. But what Games Workshop did was very clever. And with Warhammer TV and the Warhammer community, and then suddenly supporting the tournament scene, live streaming the first Sigmar Grand Tournament. So they kicked off their brand new Grand Tournament format with Sigmar. So all of a sudden, Warhammer Fantasy had been converted to Sigmar, but it was back in a big way with official support, a tournament scene. And so people started to learn to play the game at a high level very quickly. Yeah. It also helped that Sigmar, the rules are so accessible They're so easy to learn that you can start playing after reading the rule book, which is a pamphlet of 8 pages. You start playing in half an hour, dude, and you'll make some mistakes, but generally speaking, the game will run. I like Sigmar a lot. I really like it. Do I prefer it to 40k? Well, that's a big question. I think I prefer the system overall because it's much more elegant. It plays a lot better. However, with that, because they don't have the variety of books released for the different factions and sub-factions yet, you are lacking some of the variety. It can become a bit bland, and it can end up being the same, especially if you've got 2 combat-centric armies, but that's changing rapidly. The new Tzeentch release for Sigmar, added a whole lot more flavor to it. And the real rules, I've said this many times in my videos, the real rules for Sigmar are in the War Scrolls. It's not in the rulebook, but they don't have universal special rules or anything like that. So every unit is actually quite different in a way. So that's quite cool. So Sigmar, I think the future is really bright. I think it's going to be a massive game, actually.
Yeah, I know for sure that once we've started putting Sigmar on the channel, our subs shot up like crazy. I mean, as you say, when you started your 40k stuff, this is a hole right now on the YouTube of quality Sigmar, and it's a great game, and it lends itself to cinematic sort of bat reps.
Most definitely. The models are incredible as well now.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh my goodness.
I think that's where 40k is going. Every army's getting a Sigmar style big centerpiece model. I mean, Magnus is ridiculous. The latest Eldar stuff, those look like they could be in Sigmar, right?
Most definitely. You can see Games Workshop's business plan, coming to fruition here. Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
So then what do you think? So this is the question on every 40k player's mind. Everybody fears the explosion of the universe, but I don't think that's going to happen. But what do you think 40k can take from Age of Sigmar?
So, okay, if I was being real and honest and raw, I would say, and it's a big statement, and I know people, players in the community that love 7th edition now. Like, for them, it's their best edition they've ever had. The variety is incredible. Every army actually has a codex for like the first time in GW's history ever. For those of you who are old veteran hobbyists that remember when Games Workshop had a codex release every 6 to 12 months, we're far away from that. Yeah. But for those of you that play Dungeons and Dragons or ever have, there was an edition called 3.5, and it was incredible. Anything you wanted to build, you could. The whole universe was there. You could build any character you wanted. But with that came such convoluted rules, such a complicated system that actually executing it in the game required 3, 4, 5 different books with all of these supplements. Now that's what 40k's become. You go to a tournament, you've got people rolling multiple factions with Forge World in addition to that, and a 40k rulebook which is this thick. Now that isn't very elegant. And frankly, I think now that the 40k game has become a bit of a mess. It's very, very easy to abuse because of the interfaction rules and supplements that you can use. It's very easy to abuse. It's very easy to break. And as a result, you end up getting the same thing being played at high level. And that's boring. We want variety. A healthy game has lots of different variety with lots of different interesting tactics being employed. A boring game is when you see the same thing again and again and again. Otherwise, we may as well just play chess, right? Granted, we're using pretty models, but if it's one Riptide Wing versus another Riptide Wing, it's a bit boring. So, I guess you're asking me, do I think that they'll Sigmar it, or do I think that they should Sigmar it?
No, I'm asking you, what do you think that we should take from AOS? I don't think it lends itself to a complete Sigmarization, but what aspects of Sigmar do you think would work well in 40k?
Sure. I think definitely the whole toughness-based attributes. Sadly, vehicles just aren't as good in reality as monstrous creatures in 40k. Things like that. Quite simple fixes could be great. The psychic phase could definitely afford to be gutted in 40k. And that's also one of the big things that is abused regularly. Trying to dip into lots of different power disciplines. Like if psychers had fixed powers, or could maybe pay the points for like one additional power or something, and it was all fixed, you wouldn't get quite the same abuse that you get now with, over 100 different psychic power cards to pick from. So essentially, a simplification of the rules would really help 40k, and I think that's probably what they'll do. It seems they've proved that the format can work with Sigmar. I don't think that they'll go as far as Sigmar, and I actually hope that they don't. I prefer 40k to be a little bit more advanced, but that's what I think in summary.
Yeah, it certainly seems like it's very hard to get into 40k currently if you're brand new. Like, where do you start?
It's intimidating.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we'll finish off soon. What's in your future? What's in the future of Tabletop Tactics and your own gaming future?
Sure. Okay. So, Darren, you'll be happy to hear this. I've got a Ravenwing army nearly done.
I'd like to say I inspired that, but that's probably not true.
Yeah. Well, you did. So, I did a list analysis for you. So I've got a show on the channel called List Analysis, which is actually being rebooted next week.
Okay. It's been missing.
Yeah, well, I'll talk about that in a second. But with the Ravenwing, when I did your list analysis, I remember it was strong, but we were using the flies. It wasn't the best list, but it was good fun. And it absolutely inspired the list that I would do. Now, I've ended up getting 3,000 points of Ravenwing, so I've got some more competitive builds as well. So you're going to see quite a bit of variety. But this year, so future of the channel, I spent last year doing a lot of painting. I produced quite a few armies for the channel. But that wasn't really time efficient because painting takes a long time. So this year, I've actually outsourced the painting. Ravenwing is just the first project. I've actually got Tzeentch, Magnus, Thousand Suns, and a Tzeentch Demon Army on the way. Then after that, we've got Genestealer Cult coming. And then after that, we've got Harlequins coming. So lots of cool stuff. Meanwhile, there are Sigmar armies coming. And more importantly, because I get so many messages about this, I've got Horus Heresy coming.
Oh,
as
really?
Well. Yeah, so 30k is coming to the channel. Now, the reason it was on pause is because of what we just spoke about, 8th edition. Right now, I mean, that's another pressing question, a topic on people's minds. 30k players, will you be using the 40k rules? Because your rules are 7th edition. So I'm not going to start Heresy now, because if all of a sudden Forge World says, well, Heresy rules are 8th edition rules, and they re-release all of their rule books or whatever they're going to do, that would be a huge change. So we'll see what happens. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's cool. I know for one that I'd like to see. I love seeing new armies on your channel, and all the Sigmar stuff has been awesome. I myself, probably my next project is going to be an army of 100 pure strain Genestealers.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just because I'm crazy. But it's definitely exciting, and it's amazing actually how if you go to events, just the online community, like people that you kind of in quotations, but you don't really know, and just meeting people. Do you meet a lot of people like that at the LVO, or people recognize you? Or?
Dude, yeah. So the first LVO, I'd only been doing the channel, I guess, 10 months, maybe if that. And going there was strange. It was the first event I went to that had people sort of coming up and saying, "Hey, Lawrence, how are you?" I'm like, "Hi." I obviously didn't know them, right? And and then it was a bit surreal. It still is a bit surreal. But then the LVO just gone. Obviously, the channel's been around for a couple of years at that point. Was crazy. It was so much fun meeting everyone, and I got lots of people coming up to me. I had photos taken, signed codexes, and all this jazz. Like it was an amazing experience, and it was really cool to actually meet people that usually comment. Yeah. Because when people are commenting on YouTube or the website, I don't know who they are, but their personality comes through in the comments, and it's cool, and you can sort of have some banter with them. But actually meeting them properly, getting to sit down, have a drink with them, that was awesome. So that's actually my favorite part of going to an event, is like meeting the community. Yeah, it's crazy, but it's good fun.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I don't know if it's in your future, a big gaming trip to Canada, but Certainly, we've got enough people here, and could make it worth your while for a trip over.
Well, I am going to go to Canada, Darren.
Oh yeah.
It's going to happen. Yeah, so I'll be sure to drop you a line when it happens because I might be doing, well, not might be, and definitely doing. We just haven't sorted the date yet. A video with Mini Wargaming Dave.
Mm-hmm.
So when that happens, I'll do a little Canada trip. And are you near Welland?
We're in Ottawa, which is about 5 or 6 hours drive from Welland.
Okay.
But we're Canadians. We're used to we can move.
Okay, fair. So well, look, yeah, all of that to look forward to. I will definitely make a Canada trip.
Cool. Well, I just want to thank a lot, Lawrence, for joining us this morning. And as an inspiration to me to play the game and to produce a channel, I think it's awesome that we could get you on this interview. And hopefully we will see you soon over in person in Canada, or maybe even next year at the LVO. We'll see how that goes.
Sure, dude. Thank you.
All right. And thanks, everybody, for joining us for this interview. And I hope you enjoyed this content. If you guys have any particular person you'd like us to try and interview, then let us know. And thanks very much for supporting us on CanHammer.